Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I bring you 15 glitch in the matrix and supernatural stories. And we start off with 2 runs, connected by a decade. Case file number 2271, written by Comfy DW. The day I collided with my own past. It all started with me at 19. I used to go on a run down this long, open road in northeast Tennessee that was pretty much open with only fields on the side and barely any houses. I would run the same route every single day as I was really training hard before joining the army. One day I planned on taking it off, but had this weird feeling of motivation to go on this run that was sitting with me nearly all day. I chalked it up to only being that, motivation. So it's now 3 p.m., which is a lot later than my normal runs, which were usually either around 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. I'm running about 3 miles in, and I look down at my phone to change the song, and out of nowhere, I run into someone. The man who was the same height as me. He had this long beard and a pretty large stature. He was on the ground and I helped him up. I say, "My bad, sir, I didn't see anyone else around here." He says, "All good." Then looks up to me, and it looked like he had just seen a ghost. I've never seen fear like this in someone, unless I was playing scare pranks on someone. He just had a wide mouth and eyes, looking at me as he got up, and he stuck his hand out. I didn't know what he was doing and said, "Take care, sorry again." Fast forward about 10 years later. I've been in the army now for 6 years. I have a religious exemption to grow my beard. I began actually lifting weights a lot more, feeling well, doing well. Holiday block leave came around, and I got the feeling that I really should go back home to visit my family, as I hadn't actually gone back home since 2019, because flying out of Hawaii was just way too expensive, and back then I was a poor private. Now I'm stationed closer to home, and a sergeant with some money. I flew into East Tennessee, and I'm staying at a hotel. On the 3rd day, it's nice out, and the air smells nostalgic, as it's the start of fall season. And I kept thinking about the old home I stayed in with my parents, about 30 minutes away, which my mom's ex-boyfriend still lives in. So, around noon, I had dinner and decided to go visit and see how he and his kids are doing all these years later. I go and sit and talk with them for a while, and we drink a couple beers for the hell of it. I then decided I want to go check out my old running route. No idea why I thought to do this, but oh well, might as well. I tell him I'm going to go walk my old running route as it was nostalgic, and I feel it did very well for me and my future army career as a young adult. I'm walking and it's dead silent. Slight wind out, and just beautiful fields all around me. All of a sudden, I felt like I got tackled out of nowhere. There was no one in sight as far as I had known. Then I hear, "My bad, sir, I didn't see anyone else around here." I'm looking at the ground for my phone, which had fallen out of my hand, and say, "All good." That's when I looked up to the kid and immediately felt the world turned upside down. Almost like a panic attack is taking over me. Nothing feels real. I noticed the kid. It was literally me. I tried to speak, but my mouth had gone so dry, I just couldn't say anything. So I reached out weirdly, just wanting to touch my younger self. He looked at my hand, smiled, and said, "Take care, sorry again," put his headphones back in, and took off running. I stood there for literally only like 3 seconds to piece my brain back together, then yelled, "Joe, come back!" and went running to catch up to him, but to never see him again. Yet this is an open road. He couldn't have gone too far, but he vanished. This has been sitting with me ever since, a few days ago. As though it's like some weird dream, and I can't get over it. Yep, this is one of those cooler stories, the time loop paradox. At what point did you first encounter yourself to create this loop? It's a causality break, and it reminds me of Interstellar. Rewatched it recently, just realizing it's over a decade old by now. But yes, in short, you went back and interacted with yourself before you were old. Huh. traveling to the future in that sense, is entirely within the realm of physics, but encountering your past self, well again, that's a distortion of time, like it was bent around like a pretzel. Very cool. Case file number 2272, written by Positive Vibes to All. Thank you. The Resumé of Destiny. One incident happened in the late 90s. I had been laid off months prior and was having a hard time finding another job. I was super depressed and extremely broke. One day, I remembered that I had to print off a resume to fax for a job posting, with a cutoff date that was either that day or the next. But just minutes after turning on the computer, the monitor died. I was totally demoralized, as I did not even have enough money to buy a used monitor. Even used monitors were really pricey back then. I was emotionally numb. All I could think of doing was grab my coat and go outside, which would not be something I would normally do if I was extremely stressed. Normally I would have just crashed in front of the TV, but that day I just couldn't stay in the apartment. I just had to get out there. The apartment building has 3 elevators. When an elevator came to my floor and the door opened, there was a computer monitor sitting on the floor inside the elevator. I thought I was hallucinating. Then I thought it must be broken, but I jumped in, grabbed the monitor, and dragged it back to my apartment. It worked. I was now so shaken, I went outside and just walked. I couldn't believe everything that happened in a space of 10-12 minutes, and how if another elevator had come first, I would have missed it, or if I hadn't left exactly when I did, someone else would have gotten it. Years later, a Cambridge statistician who I knew worked out the odds of this happening, and he said the odds were so astronomical, it would have to be regarded as a highly anomalous occurrence, or words to that effect. I have his email, but don't feel like searching for it to be the exact phrase. Case file number 2273, written by I am very tired right now. The bathroom break that broke reality. This just happened to my husband. We were shopping at an outlet mall, and I went inside Starbucks to change my phone for a second. I was sitting in a chair right beside the restrooms, charging my phone. I'm directly beside it, so there's absolutely no way I could miss somebody walking in or out. They would have to walk directly in front of me on their way out, and they would be in my field of vision clearly the second they came out of the door as well. My husband went to use the restroom. I saw him go in. Directly in front of me is a clear view of the entire rest of the restaurant, the counter and the main dining room including a large table, with about 5 people sitting on laptops doing work. I'm looking forward when suddenly I see him seemingly plop right on the floor on his butt, kind of by the large table. The way my eyes made sense of it initially, it almost seemed like he fell or something, because he was on the floor, but he never came out of the bathroom, he never walked over, he just sort of appeared. I run up and ask if he's okay, and he looks extremely in distress and says like, "That was crazy, let's go." It took him a while to collect himself, and he was almost unable to talk, but he said he had to say what happened. He said he went in and used the bathroom, afterwards he washed his hands and leaned against the wall, and next thing he knows, he's in the main sitting area on the floor. Crap was crazy, I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. At least it didn't happen when he was on the toilet, that would be awkward. Case file number 2274, written by Anonymous. Arizona, you're just too weird. There was this place, sort of like a local YMCA, that my family went to all the time. It had a fake beach that was basically just sand around a giant pool. My brother and I went up the path that looped around the back, where we found a strange-looking bird that was hiding in a bush watching its nest. It didn't have a beak, it was more like a bill, and the thing was multicolored like a parrot, but with yellow spots all over it. It looked like something from a Dr. Seuss book. Its leg was hurt, so we went to get an employee to help us with it, because we thought it was an endangered species of flamingo or something. The employee basically brushed it off as 2 kids making up a story, and when we went back, it was just gone. Extremely confusing. The second event was with my whole family. We were outside at night, swimming in our pool, when the electricity started acting weird. Up in the sky, I crap you not, was some sort of weird triangle with lights around the base just floating there. My mom started to freak out and call the neighbors while everyone just stared up in awe. I remember feeling amazed, but also with a horrible sense of dread in my stomach. It was surreal. Moral of the story, stay away from Arizona. That place is terrifying. I might visit it now. Case file number 2275, written by Crayola Pictures. The Case of the Wandering Crucifix. I'm the oldest of 4. When I was a senior in high school, my parents went with my younger siblings to a baseball tournament for their travel teams. This tournament was 4 hours out of state, and I couldn't go because I had work that weekend. So I worked all weekend and slept over at my friend's house that night, who lived across the street from where I worked. So, Sunday night comes, I get off work at 10 p.m. and go back to my house. I sit in the kitchen on the first floor and eat my salad I took home from work. About 10 minutes later, my parents and 3 dirty children walk in baseball uniforms. My mom said her signature line, "Okay guys, upstairs and shower all that baseball dirt off." So all the little kids run upstairs and shower. My mom follows the kids upstairs to take her contacts out. My dad and I are hanging out in the kitchen, eating and talking. My dad then gets up and does what he always does when he gets home. He always checks all the locks on the doors and windows to make sure no one broke in. He confirmed everything on the second and first floor, then came to the basement. He walked downstairs, got to the bottom of the stairs, and screamed, "What the hell?" Which was jarring to me because my father never swears. I run downstairs to see that all the furniture from our entire finished basement is crammed into the small room to the side of the staircase, a room we definitely left completely empty on Friday. "What happened?" he yelled at me. "I don't know, I got home 5 minutes before you." As completely insane as I was, the most horrifying part, and I swear on my life that this is 100% true, was what I saw next. I looked under the coffee table, stuffed into the room with all the other furniture. Under the coffee table sat a crucifix. Not just any crucifix though. This crucifix had been nailed to my bedroom wall on the top floor of the house. I stared at the crucifix, silent for a minute, then ran as fast as I could up to my bedroom. No crucifix on the wall, with the nail laying 10 feet from the wall on the other side of the room, sharp side facing up. This was insane and quite frankly impossible. Our house had a security system, cameras on all the doors, and a camera that watched the outside of the house. No one had come in or out of the house the whole weekend. No broken locks, no broken windows, and nothing missing from the house. I left cash and expensive jewelry in my room, which was still there, so there's no way there was a robbery. So we went upstairs and the consensus between all 6 family members was that no one knew what happened. My mother swears up and down that she vacuumed Friday morning, hours before they left, and all the furniture was in the correct spot when they left. I have no explanation for this, and I'm honestly just so happy we don't live in a haunted house anymore. No kidding, and having camera evidence inside and out that there was no one there? I mean, just imagine what you'd have seen if the cameras were functioning downstairs, although they probably would have glitched out because ghosts have a tendency to mess with electronics. Case file number 2276, written by Vikujala. When even victory can vanish. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, I used to go to this church club every day after school with other kids. One day we were playing some game. I can't remember the rules anymore, but it had multiple rounds, and every round, few people would be eliminated, and the last one surviving would be the winner. The winner would get a fancy marble ball as a prize. I happened to be on the last round with a 7-year-old kid named Ardo, who I was friends with. We had a draw, and the teachers decided they would both give us a marble ball. Now we get to the weird part. When we were eating about an hour later, I reminded the teachers that they hadn't yet given me or Ardo the marble balls as they promised. I was surprised when nobody even remembered that we had played the game that day. Not even Ardo remembered. I remember my best friend at the time, named Rasmus, teased me because he thought I was weird for saying we played that game that day, even though we didn't in his opinion, or anyone else's opinion. I got pretty mad about it. It's been 9 years, but I remember what happened quite clearly. This might be a case of quantum immortality. Case file number 2277, written by Strix Waya, the Migraine-Induced Translocation. One evening, me and my husband were having a barbecue with drinks in the garden. A few other married friends were there too. Around 11:30 p.m., I had a pounding migraine that was feeling a bit worse for wear, so decided to call it an evening. I told the others to carry on as drinks were flowing and a good time was being had. I went up the stairs and got into bed. After a while, I woke up slightly hungover, dying of thirst, and not in my bed. Even stranger was the fact that I wasn't even in my house. I had woken up in my parents' guest room. They live about a 5-minute walk from mine. Still no idea how I got there or even got in. I didn't have any door keys with me. It was about 7 a.m.-ish when I woke up, so I immediately ran into my extremely startled parents' bedroom to ask them how and why I was there. They had no idea, nor did they hear me come into the house. After calming me down and making coffee, my dad walked me home. My husband was asleep on the sofa and doesn't recall seeing me leave, but knows that he checked on me around 3 a.m. and says that I was in bed snoring the house down. Although I don't blame aliens and lean towards alcohol, it is still a mystery to us. Few additional details. I woke up in my parents' house in my underwear and a t-shirt. My friends all left around 1 a.m. in a shared taxi. I have no previous history of sleepwalking, and my parents' house is my childhood home. Yeah, even if you sleptwalk, how did you get in without a key? Case file number 2278, written by Abject Pandora, Candy, Ghosts, and Gut Feelings. This was during Halloween a couple years ago. I took my brother and a few of his friends around our neighborhood, and then started making our way to the more well-to-do neighborhood a few blocks over. Well, where I live, we have this tunnel that runs underneath a very busy and unlit road that goes directly to this well-to-do neighborhood. I've taken this path many times with no issues, but this night, as we were walking along the path, I stopped as if I'd hit a wall. No matter how much I wanted to move forward and cash in on the king-size candy bars on the other side, my body will not cooperate. My brother and his friends are now a few feet in front of me, and they realize that I'm not with them. They turn around to ask what's wrong, and this feeling of deep dread suddenly pools in my stomach. I tell them that we have to turn around, and that we can't use the tunnel. Understandably, they're a bit upset, and only give a few weak protests, but they double back and we rush home. I don't know what that moment was or what it was supposed to mean, but it freaked me the frick out, and I haven't been to the tunnel since. The other time I was taking a shortcut home to avoid the traffic on the main roads. Well, I have to cross in front of a little back alley for a strip mall, and there's no way to actually see the alley until you're already passing in front of it. There's a huge dumpster for one of the businesses blocking the view. Anyways, I always make sure to stop in line with the dumpster and then crawl forward until I can see the alleyway before continuing forward. On this particular day, I was coming up to the dumpster, and before I could even start slowing down, there was this thought in my head that a car was going to come flying down the alleyway, then swing around and go down one of the connecting side roads. I still don't really remember what happened, and it was kind of like an all-out-of-body experience, but I slammed on the brakes just as a car came barreling from behind the dumpster, hopped part of the curb, and then turned right. I sat there for a moment with my heart in my throat and my mind kind of fuzzy. Had I crept up like I always do, I would have gotten T-boned and maybe even ended up in the hospital. I took my time going home and just sat on the couch for a bit, thinking over what happened. I'm not sure if it was some part of my mind telling me to be extra careful, based on something that I had unconsciously picked up on, or maybe someone was watching out for me, as my guardian angel. Since that incident, I've always paid attention to any intuitions or unusual feelings I get. Yeah, keep doing that. Trust your gut. Seriously, people, it's no joke. Even if it's not mystical, your gut is at least your subconscious, way more powerful than your conscious mind, relaying information via emotion. Case file number 2279, written by Fluffy McKittyman. I took a hit and phased through a wall. I was with a Christian friend of mine. You'll see why I mention his religion at the end. We're hanging out, and I tell him to watch over me while I use some salvia divinorum. So we're inside my parents' house in my room. I take a monster dose and hold it. I feel myself falling towards my left, so I lean against the wall for support. But when I do, I feel myself go through the wall, then a sensation of falling through darkness. And the next thing I know, I'm falling down onto the ground. I look around, and to my amazement, I'm outside my parents' house, right on the other side of where my room is. I look through a window and see my friend with a look of horror on his face. He runs outside saying, "It's not possible," over and over, and tells me that when I leaned against the wall, I went right through it like a ghost and landed outside. He was very upset and accused me of practicing witchcraft. He already believed in the supernatural because of his religious beliefs, and so that must have given him quite the scare. After this incident, our friendship rapidly deteriorated, and eventually he just stopped contacting me. Well, that's not nice of him. Just because of an event like that, it's not your fault. And in theory, via quantum mechanics, it is possible for solid matter to simply appear in a different location. Obviously, it's extremely rare, although at the very tiny level it happens all the time, called quantum tunneling. And without it, there couldn't be solar fusion. Case file number 2280, written by Mythopiist. The UFO that danced in the dusk. I saw a UFO at a ball game when I was a little kid. It had lights at each point of the triangle and a blinking light in the middle. It just hovered around for a few minutes, but I didn't see where it went. I don't know how big it was, but its angular size was maybe a few degrees. It could have been a drone of some kind, since there was an Air Force base nearby. But this was before quadrotors and other helicopter-style drones were really a thing. Later, in my late teens, I saw a UFO that looked like a grid of flashing lights, with an oval shape behind it. This was at sunset on a pier where I was attending a shag party. It had floated up from behind some trees across the river, hovered in place while flashing, and floating down again. A few people saw it when I pointed it out, and everyone was too busy dancing to care. I tried to get a picture, but my iPhone turned it into a blur. I don't know what it was. I think the Air Force Base was in the same general direction, but I'm not sure why they would test something where everyone could see it. And at any rate, there isn't much point in giving military technology a bunch of useless flashing lights. Good point. Case file number 2281, written by Throwaway for Dumbs. The song to chill souls. I was 11 and went to my dad's house for the weekend. Dad and stepmom go to bed in their room. My two little sisters go to sleep in their room. It's around 1:30 in the morning, give or take. I'm alone in the living room with SpongeBob playing on the TV, but the TV is muted. I'm playing Minecraft on my tablet, but my tablet is also muted. I hear singing. Distinctly a small boy singing. I pause, look around, and turn to look behind me. I see nothing. The singing stops, and something inside me screams at me to go wake my dad up. I quickly check my sister's room. They're both sound asleep. I wake up my dad and tell him I heard something in the living room and that I'm scared. He shoots out of bed, and we go to the living room together. The TV is off, my tablet is off. I tell him they were on when I went to go find them. As soon as I say it, a shelf full of glass cups falls in the kitchen. He grabs me, takes me to his room, wakes up my stepmom, tells us to sit there and wait. He went to get both of my little sisters, and we slept in his room for the night. He locked the door to the hallway, and put the door stopper at the bottom. Next day, my dad sat me down and explained this wasn't a rare occurrence, and that if I ever felt scared, he should go to me immediately. Whatever was in that house wasn't friendly, but seemed to be afraid of my dad. My sisters frequently had nightmares of a small girl around their age, who stared at them from the hallway. My stepmom had shelves collapse on her various times. My dad had books thrown in his direction. Thinking about it makes me feel scared, even during broad daylight. Case file number 2282, written by Baby Starlet. The Invisible Voice. I remember when I was 10. I shared a room with my sister, and we were both asleep as it was late into the night. I was woken up by a man speaking. It sounded like he was in between our beds, but on the ground. I tried to make sense of it. I thought maybe it was my dad, but the man literally sounded like a voice actor for those infomercials. Then I thought it was a TV in the living room left on. But the voice would have come from the wall beside me and sound muffled. I genuinely couldn't make out a single word of what he was saying, but it sounded so clear. Maybe I was too scared to even listen correctly. This dragged on for a good 10 minutes, but felt like forever, and before I knew it, it stopped. I was still scared, but got the courage to ask my sister if she had heard that, but she never responded, and I soon fell back to sleep, still scared, as I wasn't sure if the man had gotten to her, and I didn't want to check. The next morning, I had completely forgotten the whole thing, as my sleep had essentially knocked me out. My sister randomly came up to me and said, "I heard the man too." And then I remembered what happened and I got really scared again. Because I knew it wasn't a dream anymore, and that something was seriously wrong with the house. Too bad my sister doesn't remember, but I do, and we both agree that house was weird. Nothing too crazy, but it gives you a bad and creepy vibe to it, especially to kids. I like to call this multiverse leaking, where not humans or physical matter crosses the membrane between universes, but sometimes sounds and energy can. So you probably were just hearing a man that was in your room, but in a different universe's copy of it. The sound was leaking through, that's all. And maybe often what we hear or think of as ghosts, or just generally bad vibes, is us being able to unconsciously detect there's a weakening membrane in that area. Case file number 2283, written by Banana Vendetta. The Playground Plot Twist. When I was about 8 or 9, my mom took me and my sister to the playground. We ran off and climbed around separately. Now, we had just moved to a new state less than 1 year before this happened, so we didn't know many people yet. So imagine my surprise when this girl runs up to me and goes, "Banana Vendetta, why are you ignoring us? We've been calling your name, come play." I did not recognize this girl. I didn't recognize her friends. I half expected it to be a weird prank, like they were trying to see how far along they could string me. But no, they all knew my name, and we played nicely together for the afternoon. I convinced myself that the error was on my part and pretended to remember them too, paying close attention to names so that I could call them by name too and hide my embarrassment. After a while, my mom told us it was time to go home. I said goodbye to my new friends, still a little weirded out. On the way to the car, my mom asked me who I was playing with. I asked if she recognized them, and she said no. So I just told her we met that day on the playground. I still can't figure it out. My sister was in a different area of the playground, so the girls couldn't have heard her call me by name, and my mom had called my name the whole time. No one knew who they were, but they also knew a few things about me in addition to my name, like hobbies and interests. I don't remember ever seeing them again. Case file number 2284, written by 2020 Chapter, Midnight Matrimony. An experience when I was 14 that is still deeply ingrained in my brain. I was walking home from the local library one night down a narrow street, where there was only a footpath on one side. The other side was a railway track. It was already pitch black, and there were very few streetlights along the long curved road. As I'm walking down the street, in the far distance I see a white blur. At first, I didn't think much of it. I just assumed that it was someone dressed in white, or perhaps some sort of trick of the light. I'm also a little bit short-sighted. As I got closer, I started to get a little bit more nervous. The white figure started getting bigger and bigger, and it seemed a lot larger than the average person. As I finally get within distance to get a clearer look at this figure, my heart basically stops. It's a lady wearing a full wedding dress, including a veil that covers the entirety of her face. Now, I've seen enough horror movies to know this was a time to turn around and run, but I was literally entranced. I just kept walking forward towards her, trying my best to not look at her, until we eventually approached each other. As I was walking past her, I gave a quick glance which I immediately regretted. I could not see her face at all through the veil. She was very tall, easily over 6 feet, and had a large, intimidating frame. Furthermore, I could not see her legs and feet either, as it was covered, but the way she was walking seemed way too smooth. There was no natural walking movement. She did not look at me, nor did she react to me whatsoever. She just kept gliding forwards, looking directly ahead with no head movement. I also don't recall her making any sounds whatsoever. In fact, I don't even remember if I heard her footsteps. As soon as I was past her, I quickly accelerated my walking speed to get as much distance from her as possible. After about 15 seconds of this, I finally mustered the courage to take a quick look back, and what do you know? It's a literal horror cliché. She had completely vanished. There were no side streets at all, so I rationalized she must have gone into one of the houses. I proceeded to sprint down the rest of the road until I reached the main street with a lot more lighting. Even from there, I still jogged the rest of the way home. To this day, I still have no idea what I witnessed, and I've never had any other supernatural or spooky experiences like that since. I still try to avoid this stretch of road late at night whenever I visit my parents' house. Understandable. But maybe it's like Rachel and Friends. She had just run out of the altar from her ghost boyfriend. She just couldn't go through with a ghost marriage, whatever that involves. Case file number 2285, written by Anonymous. The Final Miracle. My maternal great-grandmother passed away, quite suddenly despite her age, around 10 years ago when I was a high school junior. A few hours before she passed away, she called and asked if I wanted to visit her. I wasn't at home, but it was quite late, and I was worried that by the time I went to her house, it would be even later, and she'd be tired but feel obliged to stay up to see me. I told her I would drive up to see her the next day. I woke up to the news that she had passed away and felt incredibly guilty. If I had gone, I probably would have been with her while she was passing. But that's not the story. Like I said, I felt incredibly guilty. I loved her a lot and wished I had said goodbye properly. About a year later, I dreamt I found myself in a garden and that all my deceased relatives were there. I had often dreamt of them before, but it was the first time that she was there. She was seated on a wicker chair. I ran to her, fell to her feet, and started sobbing and apologizing for not visiting when she asked me to. She took me into her arms and comforted me, saying, "We can talk about it when you get here. You'll be joining us soon." My maternal grandfather, her son-in-law, interjected and said, "No, we've decided to give her more time. She still has things to do." The next day, I decided to go get some groceries. My mother begged me not to go, and I didn't understand why and went anyway. Walking back to my car from the store, one of the bags ripped open in the middle of the street. It wasn't crowded, and I didn't see any cars around, so I knelt to the ground and started picking them up. Suddenly, I felt someone push me backwards extremely forcefully, to the point where I ended up several meters from where I was kneeling. As soon as I looked up, a car sped through exactly where I was and over my groceries. Even ignoring that I didn't see anyone push me, there was no one close enough to do so. Several onlookers came by to help me up, and every single one said they didn't understand how I fell back so far and so quickly. I went back home in a daze and told my mom what had just happened. She burst into tears and told me she dreamt that I was going to die that day. Wow. Well, no, like your grandfather said in the dream, they have plans for you. It's not your time yet. They're giving you more time. Now time for the jokes of the day. Donald Trump has signed an order banning the sale of shredded cheese. He wants to make America great again. What do you call a man with no arms and legs trying to water ski? Skip. My son is now at that age where he's curious about the human body. I guess I'll have to hide it somewhere else now. How long has it been sitting out there? I was in a band once called Teenager's Bed. It never made it. Making your bed's a waste of time anyways. I asked my daughter if she'd seen my newspaper. She told me that newspapers are old school. She said that people use tablets nowadays and handed me her iPad. That fly didn't stand a chance. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.